Here we go. Okay. Cool. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are now in our second week of the 10 plagues. And just sort of a review of what we're doing. We're looking at each plague individually through the text of the Torah, along with a whole bunch of a variety of midrashim and other commentaries on the plagues, in order to get sort of as wide a possible a view of what they were like, and what the point of them was. We saw last time that in terms of the reason for the plagues, there were four main theories. One was to get Pharaoh, or the Egyptians in general, to recognize Hashem. There was the theory that it was just to force them to let Bnei Israel go. There's a theory that it was some form of punishment or justice for what they had been doing to the Israelites. And the last theory was that it was about repentance, trying to get them to see that what they were doing were wrong and to repent from their previous behavior. We are now up to Seder, the plague of frogs, which is a very popular plague for kids. Doesn't necessarily seem so plague-like. Maybe we will find out exactly how plaguish the frogs were. But first we need to actually see what it says in the Torah. Okay, here we have some Tanachim, which may be familiar to those of you who were in the previous class in this room a few months ago. Okay, so how about everybody please take a Tanakh and open up to Shemot, chapter 7, verse 26, which in this Tanakh is on page 126. Okay, does that, I don't want to call it an evil laugh, but does that sort of
I could see. I'm good.
sneaky laugh indicate that you would like to read?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
We are on
Verse 26.
I was concerned croaks, you know.
Oh, no.
verse. The Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, 'Thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, then I will plague your whole country with frogs. The Nile shall swarm with frogs, and they shall come up and enter your palace, your bedchamber, and your bed, the houses of your courtiers and your people, and your ovens and your kneading bowls. The frogs shall come up on you, and on your people, and on all your courtiers.'" And the Lord said to Moses, "Say to Aaron, hold out your arm with the rod over the rivers, the canals, and the ponds, and bring up the frogs on the land of Egypt." Aaron held out his arm over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. But the magicians did the same with their spells, and brought frogs upon the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Plead with the Lord to remove the frogs from me and my people, and I will let the people go to sacrifice to the Lord." And Moses said to Pharaoh, "You may have this triumph over me. For what time shall I plead in behalf of you and your courtiers and your people, that the frogs be cut off from you and your houses to remain only in the Nile?" "For tomorrow," he replied. And Moshe said, "As you say, that you may know that there is none like the Lord our God. The frogs shall retreat from you and your courtiers and your people. They shall remain only in the Nile." Then Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh's presence, and Moses cried out to the Lord in the matter of the frogs which he had inflicted upon Pharaoh. And the Lord did as Moses asked. The frogs died out in the houses, the courtyards, and the fields, and they piled them up in heaps till the land stank.
Pew.
But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he became stubborn and would not heed them as the Lord had spoken. Then the Lord said to Moshe, "Say to Aaron, hold out your rod and strike the dust of the earth." That's the end of the plague.
Yes. That was the end of that plague.
Okay.
That was going to be the next one.
Yes.
Okay, so we have frogs. Anyone notice anything? Just in the first
Yeah,
read, anything stands out?
That the magicians did the same thing, but then it doesn't say anything else about the magicians. It doesn't.
Ah.
Why even bring that up?
Okay.
I mean, it's not usually. It's like, well, the magicians did the same thing, and then Pharaoh said, "Well, see, my magicians can do the same thing," but then it proves that God's frogs are big or bad or whatever. But it doesn't go to any conclusion from that.
Okay.
One.
So just collect sort of, first we're going to collect comments.
And Pharaoh was ready to let them go to worship God.
Right, until it got better. Okay, any other first impressions? Anything you notice? Anything that hops out at you?
What's the
Well, let me tell you.
Exodus 7:18? Was there anything that the wizards were able to stop? They could do things, but could they undo them?
Okay, so we're going to see that in the next plague. The question of them doing versus stopping. We're going to see that. So far here, it seems like they're just trying to reproduce what Moshe and Aharon are doing.
And how could they tell the difference between what God was doing and what the magicians were doing?
Maybe that was the point. Like, oh look, this is just a magic trick. We can do it too.
Yeah, but if there's frogs everywhere, how do they know which ones are from the magicians and which ones are from? I don't know.
Good point. Okay, so, if you look at your frog sheet, let's skip the first one for a while and start at the second source here. You got a few midrashim here that address the question of why frogs?
Do we
What's the
hear that
point of
it's
this
a water
plague?
one again?
Oh, maybe we do. That's a good thing to notice. Okay, so, would anyone like to read from Seder Eliyahu Rabbah?
Why did the frogs come upon them? The Egyptians would say to Israelites, "Go and bring us all manner of creepy crawlies, and we will play with them as much as we want." Therefore God brought upon them to frogs until their croaks could be heard even from within the Egyptian stomachs.
That's a gruesome detail at the end. But what kind of purpose is this? How does this fit into our list of options? How is this an explanation of frogs?
It's a direct response to something that was done to them.
Okay. So it's aimed at the Egyptians specifically for what they were doing to the Israelites. They're making the Israelites go out and catch frogs or centipedes or all kinds of creepy crawlies. And now God is saying, oh, you want to do that to them? Then you're going to feel what it's like when it's done to you. Okay. A similar idea you see in the next Midrashim. I don't want to read Midrashi Lamdenu. We can just sort of go around in a circle instead of asking for volunteers. Okay.
Why frogs? God said, "Let the frogs which grow in the water come and enact justice against the Egyptians who tried to destroy a nation which is destined to accept the Torah, which is compared to water, as is said, all who are thirsty go to the water."
So water represents Torah. Bnei Israel are going to receive the Torah soon. The Egyptians try to destroy them, so God says, okay,
You're not supposed to
I will
use the
plague you
Torah.
with water.
You're not supposed to use the Torah for a hammer, so if the frogs come from the Torah, it's like using the Torah to smite the Egyptians.
Maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe God can.
It's also like the punishment fits the crime. So if Pharaoh's not letting them observe the Torah and the purge of water, and their punishment is something more. Not they're using the Torah just as a Torah law. No?
Well,
What are we talking about now?
A wet one, apparently.
As of the time of the Egyptians?
There's no Torah yet.
they're going to accept the Torah.
Oh, they are.
That's the point of bringing them out of Egypt.
Right.
And so this midrash says that these water-dwelling animals are going to, as it were, fight for the honor of water, i.e. Torah, on behalf of Bnei Israel against the Egyptians.
Okay.
Okay.
Next.
Next. Okay.
That's pretty good.
Okay,
First
but by the way, the punishment fits the crime. We have a special term for that.
Neged, no.
Midah keneged midah.
Uh-huh.
Measure for measure. Okay, next. Lekach tov.
I forgot what
Well,
it
you
was.
already read,
Oh,
so
it's
you're right.
Okay. Because the Egyptians would wake up the Israelites from their, that is to say, the Israelites, from their sleep, saying, "Get up, do the work of Pharaoh." Therefore God brought upon them loud, raucous animals. The frogs would come and scream in their ears.
That's fun.
What's going on here?
The Egyptians, screamed in the Jews' ear, or the Hebrews' ears, let's say,
Right.
and so they got their comeuppance.
So basically, the Egyptians' actions have dictated, are dictating the kind of plagues that they're getting.
Right, and we're figuring out
Yeah.
what the Egyptians had been doing through analyzing, looking at the plagues themselves. What's so horrible about frogs? Well, they're loud and noisy. What else is loud and noisy? Slave masters who want to get you to do things you don't want to do. What else do you know about frogs? They live in the water. Oh, water is a metaphor for Torah. Okay, that fits also. So we're looking at the plague and trying to see, how does this make sense? How is this midah keneged midah? And that gives us some ideas about that sort of flesh out both at the same time what the plagues were like as well as what the slavery was like. So that it all makes sense. It all fits together. So before we flip the page, let's jump up to the top and see a sort of interesting. Oh, actually, I didn't mean that one.
That's too bad.
Oh, okay. Well.
In this crowd, you shouldn't apologize.
So the top one I found really interesting because this is sort of a side benefit, as it were, of the plague.
A rabbi said, "The plagues which God brought upon the Egyptians caused them to make peace among them." How so? There was a dispute between the Nubians and the Egyptians. The Egyptians would say, "Until here is our boundary," and the Nubians would say, "Until here is our boundary." Once the frogs came, they made peace between them. Whatever territory they would enter, it was known that that field did not belong to Nubia, as is said, "All your boundaries," and not anyone else's. Oh, the frogs told them where the Egyptian boundaries ended.
Exactly.
What?
Because God tells Pharaoh through Moshe,
Okay.
the frogs will plague all of your territory. So in typical rabbinic fashion, we're reading this hyper literally, all of your territory, specifically your territory, not anyone else's territory. The frogs aren't going to cross the border. They're not going to cross the boundary. They're not going to go into Nubia or Put or Canaan or any other place other than Egypt.
Would that hold up in court, Ron? As far as
Yeah, I think
Eminent
frog
domain.
boundaries is nothing to do with that.
Rabbi, going backwards though, what
yeah.
was the purpose of the blood then? The first plague?
Well, I mean, blood is probably sort of the most stark image. The Egyptians were killing the Hebrews. They were throwing their children into the river. They were beating them. All the death and the pain and the bloodiness of slavery is sort of literally filling up their land.
Is there any thought of midrashim about how long between the plagues?
Yes. There are some midrashim that claim that the plagues as a whole took, I think, a year.
Oh.
And that each one took maybe about 7 days, spread out throughout the year.
This midrash just seems funny because
Right.
I thought we talked about how the blood came and then it disappeared.
Right, well, that was just one opinion.
Okay, so the frogs. I get the sort of taking it in the way they did, but it seems awfully grandiose to suggest that somehow these plagues were creating peace amongst these various
Yeah, why would
peoples.
you bother with a positive interpretation?
Good question.
Oh, okay.
Any ideas? Anyone else? Any suggestions? I can think of two possibilities.
Oh, the repentance part of that formula.
Okay. Maybe it's trying to teach them multiple lessons. Or you can even take that lesson farther and say, oh, hey, Egyptians, guess what? This is your boundary. You're not supposed to cross this. Just like there are boundaries in morality, and you're not supposed to cross it and treat the Israelites the way you've been treating
Another
them.
metaphor.
Okay.
Or this could be sort of sarcastic, this whole midrash. You could just be sort of making fun of the Egyptians.
Maybe the Nubians didn't keep slaves, and so those who kept slaves had frog trouble, and those who didn't have frog trouble.
Could be. Although I feel like slavery was fairly common in the ancient world. I don't know enough about Nubia or Kush in the time period of Moshe or in the time period that this midrash was put together to say whether they did or not. But they were frequently under the control of the Egyptian Empire.
Grasping at straw.
I would think by the time of the Midrash, the Nubians were slaves. Not were having slaves.
Could be. I mean these midrashim were put together in the Roman period, the Byzantine period. So I don't know about what the sort of the slave economy of that region of the world was like then. I know that in the times of the sages, there were, like, they did recognize that certain nations had a habit of enslaving certain other nations. But I don't know if that applied to Nubia and Egypt, to Cush and Mitzrayim.
It's almost like they're looking at this and saying, the frogs are obviously a plague. They're causing substantial heartache and burden on the Egyptians, and it's almost like they're making light of it and saying, God is so powerful that God could be thinking about other motives even at the same time. I mean, this is no big deal for God to do this stuff. Meanwhile, the last thing they want to hear is that somehow it's creating about. I mean, not literally, but but sort of from the writer's perspective, the idea that they would be considering some upside is so bizarre, so preposterous that it's obviously saying something different than that, right? The literal doesn't make any sense, but the idea that it's I don't know, just seems like the midrash is trying to make light of. I'm not really sure. Maybe that God can be, thinking about some other thing while He's causing you such great burden, and
this other thing is for their benefit, so they stop fighting with their neighbors.
Okay, so maybe that's not it. Maybe there's a benefit there. I don't know.
That could be a recognition. The guy's got this, whatever this is, has the power. Maybe there's some benefit to recognizing it.
Could be. Sounds good. Okay.
And the idea of these midrashim is that they are the rabbis trying to, and you say these are all done in the 200s, the 300s?
It's hard to date any particular midrash. The midrash collections we have, like the contents of them,
100.
seem to date anywheres from the year 0, or maybe even a little bit before, all the way up into the medieval period to like the year 1000. they were still being collected.
I don't think there was a year zero.
Huh?
I don't think there was a year zero. Just a,
Okay,
so actually what I meant was that I really wanted to debate whether there was a year zero or not.
Okay.
And no, so
Then it's just a metaphor.
what is the, for example, with this one, what is the point of this? Why are we doing this?
This particular one, that particular midrash? That particular midrash?
Well, in general, what are the rabbis trying to do, and what are they trying to do in this one? I mean, I took a poke at it, but I mean, I look at this and I say, okay, they're going to elaborate measures to do what?
Midrash serves a number of distinct purposes. One is midrash is a particular way of reading the text, which is hyper-literal. Because the assumption is that it comes from God, and therefore every sentence, every word, maybe even every letter has to have meaning. It has to be there for a particular purpose. And therefore every word has to mean what it says, even if contextually it doesn't necessarily make sense. A lot of people think that, so the opposite of midrash is pshat. So a lot of people hear about pshat and drash. And a lot of people think pshat is literal and drash is metaphorical. It's not true. Pshat is contextual or straightforward. Drash is hyperliteral. If I tell you you're driving me up the wall, and I mean that you're making me crazy, that's pshat. Because it's not literal, because it's an expression, it's a normal way that people speak. Drash, you're driving up the wall, every word has to mean what it means. You're literally, hyperliterally, driving me up the wall. That's midrash. And so when the rabbis see that it says that the frogs would fill all your boundaries, then they're wondering, why does it say boundaries? Why does it say all boundaries? Why does it say all your boundaries? Each of those words needs to be there for a reason. And so if it's specifically all your boundaries, then it's not anyone else's boundaries. And therefore, it's Egypt and not Nubia. And then they just sort of let the idea percolate and develop from there.
And that's midrash.
Yeah, that's
Hyper-literal.
Yeah, that's the midrashic mode of reading. Another purpose of midrash is to explain things that aren't clear in the text, or to teach a message by connecting it to the text. So when a rabbi gets up and gives a sermon in this year or 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, that's also a form of drash. So all of those different goals are all part of midrash. And so here it seems that they're reading it hyperliterally to get this idea, and then probably using that idea to present messages through it.
And I just wasn't able to glean in that first one. He's sitting here 2,000 years later, was not able to glean what that message was. I get the hyperliteral part,
Okay.
but it's not connecting. I'm not getting why you go to this. So okay, I get that. If you think somehow that you must go through that exercise and recognize that every word means something, okay, I don't have to agree that that's a smart thing to do, but it doesn't matter what I think. That's what they were doing.
Right.
But were they always then trying to sort of glean some new meaning? Or is that the meaning that they were trying to glean here? That it must have meant that this literal thing about the boundaries, that's what it really meant. Do they really think that?
Considering that midrash is full of like multiple voices that disagree with each other, I don't think they're saying that this is the only way to read this and the only thing that it could mean. It's just one possible meaning.
Is there a lesson in there for us?
Well, I think one possibility is the idea of boundaries, that just like there are boundaries to nations, there's also boundaries to morality, and that the Egyptians had been trespassing over the boundary of morality and how they were treating Bnei Israel. So that's just
I think
one
that's
possibility.
alluded to in the, let's see, where's the Creepy Crawlies one?
The next
That's
one.
alluded to in the Creepy Crawlies one because, the Creepy Crawlies are really low to the ground, yicky things.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're saying is the morality of the Egyptians was really low. You know, they were at the bottom of a morass, morally.
Okay.
Good point. Cool. Thank you. Great idea.
So that, you know, that's where that comes in.
Okay, are we ready to move on from the question of what did the frogs represent to the question of what did this plague look like? Okay. Who's
Karen.
up next?
No, we just
Me.
Oh,
So
Bob
Rashi, we're reading?
Yeah.
Karen Beth.
There was one frog, and when they would hit it, it would shatter into swarms and swarms. That's the midrashic approach. And the pshat, straightforward contextual interpretation, would be that a swarming group of frogs can be described using singular form words.
Oh, because why is it called Sfard?
Right. It calls
Svardeia
the
is a
plague is
singular.
referred to as Svardeia, which just means frog, but it would seem to be referring to many, many frogs all over the place. So the midrashic, the hyperliteral, is to say, oh, there was one frog. Maybe it started as one frog. When they attacked it, it would burst into lots of little frogs.
That's the Kabbalistic approach.
Not Kabbalistic, but midrashic. Kabbalistic would be to connect the features of what we're describing to some kind of cosmic
Well,
reality that we
I
can't
was thinking
see.
of the supernal light, you know, the
Yeah. Oh, that.
Ruah.
The shattering the vessels
Yeah, right.
and okay. Well, sort of. Well, there's a similarity in that things are breaking apart, but so this is more sort of horror movie-esque, I would think.
Right, because couldn't you say locust? That's like
Yeah.
a it's a
Yeah.
whole swarm of them.
Yeah.
So frog, they had
It's a singular and a plural.
singular that implies a plural thing. What else do we
Yeah.
have like that? Vermin? That's maybe one vermin, many vermin.
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
You know, it's a whole planet full of
Right.
man.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I like this.
So, similarly, if we look at the next one, this is from the Gemara.
Rabbi Akiva said there was one frog and it filled the entire land of Egypt. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah said to him, Akiva, what are you doing with Agada? Go back to your halachic analysis of the impurity of skin discoloration in tents. There was one frog and it whistled to the others and they came.
I don't know what's going
They're
on
messing
here.
around.
Hey, guys,
They're messing around. They're arguing over this very midrashic, agadic analysis of saying, oh, Tzvardea means just one of them. And Rabbi Akiva says there was one frog. Okay, fine. It must have been a giant frog that covered the entire country. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that's not how it works. This one makes more sense. There was one frog at first, and then it called the others like an army coming behind it. I don't know how Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would justify that his midrashic storyline makes more sense than Rabbi Akiva's, but for whatever reason he felt that it was worth it to tell Rabbi Akiva to stop dealing with these agadic, midrashic narratives and to go back and deal with the halachic nuts and bolts of skin discolorations.
That was the
Rabbi, I read someplace that when Pharaoh first started up with the Hebrews and wanted them to introduce them to slavery, he started off with asking them to volunteer to produce a brick, and then it became obligatory, and then he kept increasing the amount. So perhaps that is a explanation of we're starting off simply with one and then expanding.
Oh,
That's cool.
good. Very possible. Makes a lot of sense. Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
I was just gonna say Rabbi Elazar was really disrespectful to Rabbi Akiva. That was really like,
So a lot of time, like, we see a lot of sort of verbal sparring among the rabbis. Also due to the fact that we don't have, like, emoticons had not been invented yet. So we don't know how he said this. We don't know if he said it like, come on, or if he said it in like a joking, friendly manner. We don't know, but we do find rabbis in the Talmud speaking what seems to be very harshly to each other, in ways that other rabbinic statements about how you treat other people would not seem to support. So it's unclear how harsh he's being, whether he's being friendly or playful, or really or if he's really offended by Rabbi Akiva's attempt to indulge in Agadah.
What do we know about Elazar ben Azariah?
So there's
a factor?
So there's a story about him that he was fairly young, but he was, due to some political issues in the rabbinic leadership at the time, he was chosen to be the leader, and that he was not confident in his ability and whether people would respect him because he was too young to be the leader, and so his hair turned white so he would look older. And so that's an explanation that's given for the line that's actually quoted in the Haggadah, where he says, "I am about 70 years old, and I never understood what this particular thing meant until this other sage came and explained it." So they say, reading it very midrashically, what does "ki ben shavim," like 70 years old, mean? It means, he wasn't really 70 years old, he just looked that because of this thing that happened to him.
Could be translated as if.
Yeah, I mean, it can mean as if, it can mean around.
Yeah.
So the pshat way to read it, what he's saying, I'm about 70 years old.
Or it could be as mature or as wise as 70 years old.
Well, for a guy that doesn't have a lot of confidence, he's really sticking it to Akiva, the sage of the universe.
Oh, there were a lot of very illustrious sages, all in the same generations around then. So now we think of Rabbi Akiva as it's Rabbi Akiva, who would compare to him? But there were other sages at the same time who would dispute with each other frequently. Okay. So, what happened to the frogs? They didn't disappear. So after they swarm throughout Egypt, they get in everyone's face.
They went away.
They die.
Start rotting away.
Yeah, and they rot. They die and they rot.
Oh, died out.
They smelled.
And they smelled.
stunk.
They stink. Okay, so let's look at the next
I see.
source here.
I just read.
Oh,
Your turn.
the frogs died because the Egyptians would not, anyways, have any benefit from their carcasses or skins.
So they wouldn't have any benefit.
Because they would not have any benefit. If frog skins were valuable and the frogs died, then how would the Egyptians
They would have
react?
profited from it.
They would have profited.
Like
Right.
alligators.
They would be like, like alligators.
Yeah.
Okay.
Crocodiles in Egypt. There's no alligators.
Okay. Let's jump down to the bottom. Ibn Ezra.
The commentaries disagreed about the meaning of the word svardim. Many say that it is a kind of fish, aquatic creature, that is found in Egypt, which is called in Arabic al-timsah,
Timsah.
and comes out of the river to catch human beings. Others say they are the animal found in the majority of rivers, which makes noise, and this is the proper interpretation in my eyes, which is also the well-known one.
So what do many people think Tzfardea was?
Not frogs.
Not frogs, but
Sounds like
Sea
alligators
monster.
or something.
yeah, crocodiles. Timsah is a crocodile in Arabic. It's an animal, the aquatic creature that lives in Egypt and comes out of the river to catch human beings.
They'd be a lot scarier than frogs.
Yes, they would be.
They would be.
And so that's probably why many people in the time of Ibn Ezra thought that maybe Tzfardea meant crocodiles.
Now crocodiles.
Because that would be a plague.
Big and
Well, like frogs on your head, like a frog song, little frog. It don't seem so scary. But crocodiles, that's a plague. Unfortunately, it doesn't really seem to fit the word. Basically, everyone agrees that Tzfardea probably means frogs. And so Ibn Ezra brings up this suggestion. He doesn't say it's dumb. He doesn't say that it's like completely out there, but he says Frogs makes more sense. Probably not the crocodiles.
Do crocodiles make sounds?
Yeah, they croak.
Yes, yeah, right.
They do?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. From what I've read anyway.
Okay.
They can make sounds.
Okay.
This is like finding every possible way to annoy somebody,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
By the time you get from the beginning of this list to the end,
Right.
it's like a cartoon.
Right. But so this midrash about saying that
Crocodile.
they rotted because their skins weren't worth anything would seem to support the common view that it was frogs and not crocodiles. Because crocodile skins would assumedly, I mean, I don't know for sure, but
Right.
crocodile skins I assume are like alligator skins. People use them.
Sure. Crocodile boots.
Yeah, the had Loris, they had her.
Oh, the frog legs.
Frog legs. Okay, so we have one last frog source before we can move on. From Midrash Tehillim.
Oh, the frogs would cast themselves into the ovens and descend to sanctify God's name. And how did God reward them?
Oh, I missed. Sorry.
All the frogs in Egypt died, but those who went down into the ovens did not die, because they gave themselves up for burning in order to fulfill God's decree. Therefore, they came back up from the ovens alive and went back down to the Nile. Whoa.
I'm glad they have no sense.
What? Frogs? Yeah.
So, in the Psukim, it said that the frogs came and went into your house, your bedroom, your bed, the houses of your servants,
So wait,
and your people, uve tanurecha, and into your ovens, uve misharotecha, your kneading bowls or kneading troughs.
so the frogs had free will to decide where they were going to go?
According to this midrash,
And the ones that decided to go, really? Okay. That's interesting.
so one side, the sort of textual side, is saying, oh, it says in the pasuk that the frogs went into the ovens. Okay, I guess they must have went into the ovens. The ovens are usually on, so wow, those are pretty brave frogs.
We're down, but okay.
But what other ideas could be being expressed by this midrash by talking about frogs giving themselves up for burning? L'kadesh Shmo Shel Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Nice.
They're sanctifying God's name.
Got it.
Somewhere in the text it says they went in the ovens.
It
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
Yes.
The end of
Whoever knew
Perek
that.
Zayin, so it's chapter 7, verse 28.
God decreed they were going to go in the oven.
Did Egyptians eat frog?
Not that we know of. I guess not. I mean, maybe. I mean, according to everything we've seen, there's no indication that they
So
did.
there would have been no benefit from them whatsoever.
Yeah, there are other plagues that they may have wanted to eat. We will get there.
Doesn't that, isn't that the contextual reading, isn't that, I mean, understood to mean that they went everywhere? And
Yeah.
that even in the ovens, even in the openings that you know, were not part of the living area, they even went in there.
Right, assumedly when the ovens were not burning.
I don't like this one.
Or got in
Why?
their way of food,
Well,
of
yeah, but-
having food.
But it says they
Too
gave
soon.
themselves up for burning, so they
No,
burned.
so that's the midrash,
I don't like this one.
which says, oh, it's in an oven, so they actually went in when it was burning, when there was fire there, and they gave up their lives. I think sort of a pshat read of like, oh, they were everywhere, even these places that you would assume they would not go into, but not necessarily that they burned themselves.
No, I think what Beth said,
Yeah.
because right afterwards it says the kneading bowls.
Right.
So it prevented the Egyptians from having any food. It was in
Right.
their ovens and.
Right.
That's the
But this
pshat.
assumes that the frogs could have said no to God. Say, you know, okay, you want me to go, you want me to do this, I'm not going to do this.
Right, or they would
So-
choose,
Yeah,
I want to
so-
go in the
Frogs
bed.
think.
Right. This is, I mean,
I don't
just-
want to go into the...
Right, I don't like this. I don't, it doesn't make sense to me. It bothers me.
Okay,
I mean, if God decrees a plague,
okay.
then God decrees the plague, and He's in control of every aspect of that plague. You know, he can't leave it up to a frog that may or may not want to acquiesce to his his thought.
Okay, but then who does have the ability to choose to give up their lives
Human
for God?
beings, the
Human beings.
Egyptians, right.
Or Jews
Or Jews.
throughout history.
Okay.
And so the frogs can become a metaphor for Jews who have given up their lives for God in various...
Martyrs and things
yeah.
like that? Okay.
And that's
Yeah,
the exact
so
term that they
you-
use
right, you
to
have to-
sanctify God's name.
There you go.
Ah.
You have to imagine that there were even more of these. And to me, part of what's fascinating is that, you know, if you took a room of 20 people and could just your average person or your slightly above average person come up with midrashim on their own, and if so, how is it that these particular midrashim have stood the test of time, or at the time stood the test of time, and we are now reading them? That's.
Some of them survived because they were popular.
I mean, they appealed to somebody.
Right.
along
And
the
others
way.
were sort of like rediscovered in manuscripts, and maybe they weren't so popular, but we found them again.
Are there many more? And you just picked?
Yeah,
or is
there's
this
a lot
close?
more, yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
I would like to know what the Hebrew
Yeah.
meaning is, because it's unlikely that a frog would cast itself into a non-burning oven. And if they cast
Into a
themselves,
burning
Wait, so which do you want? The midrash phrase or in the psukim?
the
In the midrash? Oh, here?
the Hebrew.
In the Torah?
Yeah.
It's just listing the places that they go, and it says in the ovens. It doesn't say whether it was burning or not.
Well, it's funny that there's just, I was just checking this, I remembered something. And there's the famous...
Boiling the frog?
Boiling the frog, right. So the frog, you know, the story is that if you put a frog in boiling water,
Oh.
it will jump out. It will not stay in the boiling water, and you can't boil for a frog. You just can't do it. But if you put it in cold water and then turn the heat up slowly, it will not realize what's going on until it can't jump out of the pot anymore, and it will die.
It'll assimilate until it dies.
And so if you assume that the oven was truly hot,
Right.
then it's really saying something to suggest that the frogs would have gone in there, right? That's not what they do.
Right.
They know better.
Right.
I only say that because that's this particular famous parable or whatever you call it, that we know frogs don't go into hot places like that. That's just...
I was thinking.
Well, and maybe that's another sort of proof that it's meant to be a metaphor to
Right.
teach about human beings.
Right.
There we go. Okay, that's good.
Okay. Are we ready to move on from the frogs? Frogs have croaked. Hopefully they didn't stink. Okay. Here we go. Kinim, lice. Whose turn to read is it?
Mine.
Okay, so do you mind reading from Chumash?
I have this Chumash, I don't know if you like it.
Oh, no, it's fine. Any translation is good as long as you're looking at Perek 8, Psukim 12 through 15.
And the Lord said unto Moses, Say unto Aaron, Stretch out thy rod, and smite the dust of the earth, that it may become gnats. That's how they translate it.
Oh, nice.
Throughout all the land of Egypt. They did so, and Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod, and smote the dust of the earth, and there were gnats upon man, and upon beast. All the dust of the earth became gnats, throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their secret arts, to bring forth gnats, but they could not. And there were gnats upon man, and upon beast. Then the magicians said unto Pharaoh, This is the finger of God. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had spoken.
Thank you. Kinim, lice, or as your translation has, gnats.
That's very
Do you wanna address that question first about
What's
what
the
were
difference
they?
between a gnat and lice?
I mean, basically, lice are usually like things that like crawl on your head,
Go to
and
Hillel.
like
They do a
go
lot
to
of
little
those.
kids get them.
All the lice in the world are in Hillel Day School.
Yes, they
We know
did.
that.
They got some pretty strong strains over there.
Right. Whereas gnats
They're
are
more
like
like
little
parasites.
I'll
slime.
say the word
Yeah.
and I
Aren't they more like
won't.
parasites?
Yeah, they suck your blood
suck
from like
the
your
blood.
follicles
They
and
eat-
stuff.
They itch.
No, but they itch, okay.
But they
do.
But they
They're
also
parasites in your
they
skin.
live off of the
They're
of the-
parasitic,
No, I
yeah.
agree.
right.
Yeah.
But gnats, they're just like
Yeah.
They're nasty, but they're not like, they're not really on you. They're around you.
These ones in our neighborhood, yes.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying that the words were, where was I here? It said, the gnats were upon man. I don't know what the Hebrew says, so maybe there's a different, it says upon man and upon beasts. And, well, what is
What does it
that?
say? B?
Uh-huh.
B, okay.
That's in.
So B literally means in,
In.
but it can mean against. Like we were talking about
Right,
something negative
but
happening to
gnats-
someone.
Funny, I don't think of gnats as being against or in. I think of lice as being against or in.
Sorry, against in the sort of attack sense, not against in like the spatial sense. Against in the you're being attacked with this.
You know, the Chumash here.
Okay,
said-
I get that.
This Chumash
Yeah.
says, it suggests there's another interpretation besides lice, and that it should be a dog fly, which is a blood-sucking insect that can multiply and eat your blood. But it doesn't say gnats.
Okay,
You
so
just wanted to say blood sucking.
It's
okay,
blood-sucking.
so let's
This one says vermin.
Like deer fly. Yeah,
So
something
let's,
about,
I mean, gnats is
Just
like
lice.
benign. You know
Right,
I'm
that's
saying?
what I was trying to say.
frogs are usually benign too.
Yeah, but even
that's
though.
right.
But even though.
Well, that's, but there I think
This
is a point to that.
This considers another interpretation, of lice. It
Right.
still doesn't say gnats. So where they got gnats over there, I don't know.
So let's look. Let's look.
Okay.
Yeah,
I brought you a bunch of
By the way,
sources about what's
frogs,
going on there.
frogs may not be so bad in and of themselves, but the number of frogs makes it impossible to do anything. right?
Exactly.
And gnats would do the same
You're
thing.
doing it.
I mean, it's so annoying to have like a little, group of gnats around your head.
Right.
But imagine if you couldn't go anywhere without gnats all over your head. It would be pretty bad.
Three Stooges.
Right? It would prevent you from doing anything.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
So it's pretty bad.
It- 'cause
Okay.
But you wouldn't be able to say blood sucking.
This is like the Three Stooges. It's like a
Got that out of my
cartoon,
system already.
in a way.
Yeah.
When you know how they, or you can visualize other cartoons when one character is just driving the other character crazy. They're
Ah.
just being so phenomenally annoying
Right.
in every possible way that they can imagine. Yeah,
That's what you think of lice?
that's what I think of all of these. Because lice are not serious. They're not.
Oh.
They're not dangerous.
Okay, so before we get to the question of were they lice or gnats or dog flies or other, let's look at what Ramban
Okay.
says here.
Okay.
And I'll read it. Ramban says, if you notice, there's no warning here. The previous plagues had warnings. Moshe goes to Pharaoh and says, God is going to do this to you. Here there's no such thing. He did not warn him because God only would warn Pharaoh about plagues that contain death for human beings.
What frogs contain
We could slip on them and fall.
Yeah. I mean, maybe Ramban thinks that they're crocodiles, but probably not.
Oh, okay, let's go with that.
Maybe because of the stinking and the rotting. Maybe because it maybe
They
the
couldn't
frogs
eat.
got into them.
They couldn't eat.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's find it.
And this is all mercy from God for humanity, like the verse in Yechezkel says, and you, once you have warned an evildoer away from his path to return from it, and he has not repented from his evil path, he will die in his sin, while you have rescued your own soul. Meaning you wanna warn them to give a chance to repent, but if it's just going to be really, really annoying, but not directly kill them, then no warning is necessary. That's Ramban's theory so far.
Right, so what's the significance of the magicians couldn't cook up lice?
We'll get there too. Okay, so first, what were the lice? Who are we up to? Who wants to read? Kasuto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bottom of the first page.
Oh, the Kasuda?
Yep.
Okay. What were the lice? It's not exactly clear. For sure they were insects, but it would seem not the type that we call today by that name. Because they are described as coming from the dust of the earth. When the dust brings them onto human beings and animals, it would seem that they can fly and have wings. Maybe the intention is some kind of flies or mosquitoes, which are themselves a known national plague in Egypt. Maybe the type that the Egyptians called Chenmes.
Sounds like
I don't know enough about Egyptology or ancient Egyptian to know what he's talking about when he refers to what the Egyptians called chenmes, but his sort of logical steps are: it's described as coming from the dust, attacking people and animals. Therefore, to get from there to here, it must be able to fly. Therefore, it's probably not lice like on your head. It's probably some kind of winged insect, like mosquitoes or gnats.
But
Okay.
I took a class last year, and the rabbis thought that lice came from dust
And sweat.
and sweat.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Casuto is in the mid-20th century,
Oh.
so he doesn't believe in that anymore.
Okay. Okay.
But some of the other commentators
Oh,
that
the
we'll
next
see
one. Oh, there
do.
it goes. Here.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can't remember what we were studying. But
I think it's.
So-
no, about scientific bases.
Cool. Cool.
This is interesting.
It's cut.
Yeah.
The Luzzatto,
Yeah. Wait. We're gonna get there.
Oh,
we're gonna get to
sorry, I
Shadal.
was looking at-
Shadal is here.
sorry, I was looking at the Chumash, I didn't know you had that one.
Okay, Shadal's on the page. You want to skip down to Shadal?
Your order's good.
Okay, so first let's go to Rashbam. Rashbam says, "Oh, lice doesn't mean like lice specifically. Types of lice and fleas, all kinds of similar little insects that infest people."
Fleas, by the way, don't fly.
Okay, so Rashbam, neither do lice. So Rashbam is disagreeing with Casuto,
A long way.
Yeah.
or Casuto is disagreeing with Rashbam because he came like 800 years after.
Maybe he's
Okay.
itching now.
Sorry. Okay. So Haktava Kabbalah, who's not as recent as Casuto, maybe like 200 years ago, but he seems to still possibly believe in spontaneous generation. So, who are we up to reading?
They said in a midrash that lice are things that are created from the dust, and so God used them to enact judgment against Egypt, who tried to destroy a nation who are compared to the dust, as it is written, "Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth."
Okay, hold on a sec, please. Sorry for a second. So just like the previous one about the frogs and the blood and the water representing Torah, here too, God tells Abraham, your descendants will be like dust. The Egyptians are abusing the dust, and therefore the dust, in the form of the lice, takes vengeance against the Egyptians. Please continue.
From these words, we see that the plague of lice did not consist of those white creatures that crawl on a person's head from their sweat.
I love that description. That's literally what he says. Otan halevanot harohashot barosh ha'adam mize'ato. Those white things that crawl on a person's head from their sweat.
Lice. Lice are brown. Ew, this
No,
is
but
like
the
solid.
eggs are kind of whitish.
It's like
Okay, sorry.
The egg scroll.
white sounds
No,
worse.
no.
Okay.
Sorry, please continue.
Crawl on a person's head.
But were some other type of creepy crawler, or maybe the black lice that jump and come out of the ground.
I don't know what these black lice are. Assumedly some other kind of insect that he was familiar with or had heard of. Okay.
Gross.
Yeah, that's very
Apparently
gross.
you were never a Boy Scout.
I was never a Boy Scout. I was a Cub Scout. I don't think I ever graduated to actual Boy Scout. I like nature, but I don't like insects in nature.
That's why we did winter camping.
Oh, nice. Cool. Well, I come from a subtropical island called Brooklyn. We didn't do winter. Okay, Shadal, Shmuel David Luzzatto, also fairly recent, last few hundred years. So he also quotes a midrash.
Oh, Shadal is Luzzatto?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few Lutzatos. There's Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Lutzato, and there's Shadal, Shmuel David Lutzato. Ramchal was a Kabbalist and philosopher. Shadal was mostly a Bible scholar.
Which one is Mesilas?
Mesilas Yesharim is Ramchal.
Ramchal.
Yeah. His distant cousin. Okay, so there's a midrash that says, God brought upon them many types of lice, the smallest of them like the size of a chicken egg, and the largest like the egg of a goose.
This guy has never seen lice.
So why is he? What's this all about?
Well, somebody else said that there was just a
what's it?
panoply of bugs, just a lot of different bugs. Those Rashba.
But
These are huge bugs.
Right, they're huge, they're monstrous.
Yeah, you see
That would be the magical
large
part of
spiders.
it.
Right, that would be the miraculous part of it, the frightening, the horrifying part of it, the plague part of it.
Right.
Because if it's just lice, okay, everyone has lice. I mean, like, we don't have lice now because we're grown-ups in America in the 21st century.
Because we all went to Hillel Day School.
No, but the difference in
But in-
Yeah, that's right, I learned in Carrie
lice at Hillel Day School and lice in Israel. I have friends in Israel. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, why do you think
They all
Hillel?
Right.
have lice.
Where do you think the lice comes to Hillel?
I know. I know.
Right, so when everyone has lice, okay, it's just a thing,
Right,
people have lice.
right,
Yeah.
That's right.
So what makes lice monstrous and horrifying and plague? One thing could be if they're horror movie sized
There you
lice.
go.
Good.
Or if there are a lot of them, there are a lot of frogs.
Right,
One
okay.
frog, so what?
Right, so that's another possibility.
Right. That's.
Okay, so we have the question of what are the magicians / hieroglyphists / however else we want to translate Hartumim doing when they're trying to bring out more lice, and then they can't. What's going on here? So,
Why do we have to assume that the word lice means what we think lice is?
well, we don't, because that's what Kasuto said. Kasuto says it doesn't make sense for them to be lice as we know them.
Even like the word frog, why wouldn't we have to assume that it's what we believe that what frogs are? Why is there that continuous?
We don't have to assume, but it usually makes the most sense when you have a
makes the most sense
continual
from our
linguistic tradition.
Yeah.
Like words do change meaning, but not that much.
Paul, you need to visualize something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if it's just God brought something that we don't know what this thing is, then it's very esoteric. Like you need to, in order for it to really hit home, you need to visualize something that is real to you.
Okay.
So as long as we're making it frogs, it doesn't have to, we're making it. You know.
Okay.
And visualizing it, the more graphic the descriptions are, the more they affect you, the more they give you a feeling of the power of God and how horrible the Egyptians must have been to deserve this. There's actually a Haggadah that you can buy. I've seen it, where they take basically all the most gruesome midrashim about what slavery was like and what the plagues were like, and they illustrate it. And the style of illustration reminds me sort of the Prince of Egypt movie, but it's not related to
I think I've
it.
seen that one.
Together where the wild things
It's
are.
expensive, I got it, but it's very nice.
Really?
It's very well illustrated.
Yeah.
It's just the illustrations are gruesome.
Sendak, yeah, so maybe it's a more Sendak Haggadah.
Oh, maybe not this one, not the one I'm thinking of. It's a different drawing style.
Really rich
That would be pretty
colors
cool though.
and stuff.
Maurice
Yeah.
Sendak, I got it. Okay,
Too late to suggest.
so the Hartumim, they try lehotzi et hakinim, to take out or bring out the lice. So Rashi says, what does it mean to bring them out? To create them from another place. Just like they wanted to reproduce the plague of blood and the plague of frogs, so they're trying to reproduce the lice and make more lice. But they were not able. Because shadim, gremlins or demons, cannot control creatures smaller than a barley seed. So Rashi is coming from certain assumptions. One, the Hartumim were, as some of the other translations put it here, magicians. Two, the magic they had worked in some way. Three, their magical powers were rooted in gremlins, shedim, which are usually translated as demons, but I prefer to translate it as gremlins because most of the descriptions of them seem more sort of like gremlin-like, like malicious as opposed to like demonic.
Oh.
Like they're just trying to mess with you as opposed to. And
It's a bad car too.
I had that car.
Really?
I drove that car.
yeah. What happened if you tried to fill it with gas after midnight?
Yeah. I wouldn't come home that night.
Okay, so Rashi's getting this from the Gemara, that somehow in this conception that there are gremlins and that they have magic powers and that people can use their magic powers, they cannot control things smaller than a barley seed.
Where does he get that rule from?
I don't know. It could be that rule comes from this story,
Okay.
that they couldn't control lice. They couldn't bring out more lice. Or maybe there was some pre-existing belief
Yeah.
that magic could not be done in that way. I don't know.
Here's a reference, Lafitte Bavli Sanhedrin, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that's where.
Right. So this is so the next source is the actual quote from the Gemara of this. It turns out that it's a discussion. Rabbi Elazar says, "From here we know that a gremlin cannot create a creature smaller than a barley seed." From this story, when the magicians couldn't make more lice. Rav Papa said, "By God, even a camel it couldn't create." You're saying gremlins can't create like little creepy crawlies? They couldn't even make a camel. They couldn't make a big thing. You think they can make big things? That doesn't work either.
So Papa Bar Papa?
Wait, sorry. Could you repeat the question?
It was Rav Papa, doesn't say Bar.
All right, there are two of them. I just want.
Well, no, there are a lot of people named Bar Papa,
Yeah.
because that means son of Papa. So I don't know if any of those specific ones are related to this Rav Papa. So it could just collect them from elsewhere, but it couldn't collect the tiny creatures. So he doesn't say gremlins can't do anything. He doesn't say the magic isn't real, as some other scholars might say in other periods of time. But what he is saying is that things that probably where he's coming from is from a philosophical assertion that things that are not God cannot create. So if you're using magical powers or manipulating gremlins or something and it looks like you're creating something, you're not really creating it. You must just be conjuring it up from some other place. That's his theory.
Okay.
So, but that doesn't explain why they couldn't collect up the lice from some of the.
Because they were too small. Rabbi Elazar says they can't make things that are too small. Rav Papa says they can't affect things that are too small. They're trying to transport them from some other place, and they couldn't. Now to sort of get more into these very magical, fantastical images, Chizkuni, based on another Talmudic description, gives another explanation of why they couldn't do it. Who are we up to reading-wise?
Where are we?
Top of page 3.
Hizkuni, based on Talmud Yerushalmi Sanhedrin. Another explanation for they were not able is that all the dust of the earth had already turned to lice, and so their legs could not touch the ground. And as long as the sorcerer's feet are not touching the ground, his sorcery cannot succeed.
Another rule that we should know about.
Right. So there are two things here that intrigue me. One is this magic rule about if you want to do like evil magic, you have to touch the ground.
Everybody.
Like, what's that about? Oh, actually, I didn't realize this at the time, but there are other legends about this. Like, there's a legend of Shimon ben Shetach fighting the clan of witches in the caves, where his students go, and in order to stop them from zapping them, they pick them up. I don't remember where I heard the story, where I read it, but I just realized there's another reference to this idea.
There's another thought about Egypt, that everything from Egypt comes from the ground, and everything for the Jews comes from above.
Oh,
So,
nice.
like their water comes from the ground. You know, it comes from the
Right.
Nile. It doesn't come from rain. And the Jews prayed for rain.
Right, and it says that specifically in the Torah. It says, I took you out of Egypt, where you water your fields with the water of the river, and I'm bringing you to Israel, where the water comes from the rain, from the clouds, from the sky, and I give it to you, God is speaking.
That's good.
Cool, wow, thank you.
All right, Roberto.
If it weren't for cartoons on
Wasn't joking
TV,
Yeah?
I wouldn't know what a gremlin or a demon was, because it's never been introduced formally. As far as I
I didn't realize that.
am knowledgeable about in our liturgy or in our prayers. I mean, we talk
Right, they don't
about
have-
forces of evil, but this is
Shadim don't
something
appear in
new.
prayers, they appear in stories.
Are they in the
Yeah.
Torah at all?
In the Torah, yeah, I think so. I think the references things that you're not allowed to worship.
And
Not allowed to
how about
worship
sorcerers?
portion?
You're not allowed to worship them. They're not
Worship.
God.
How about sorcerers?
Sorcerers, well, yeah, that's the word. I use sorcerer to translate mechashef,
Okay, which is
frequently translated as witch or warlock.
So actually,
It's one of the forbidden occult practices, where it says, don't do this.
okay.
So the magicians could have power if they were Egyptian, because as long as they had a connection to the ground, so that makes a lot of sense.
Right, no, right, so according to this, right, and so, but this image, like, amazes me. They couldn't touch the ground because all the dust was lice.
Yeah, so
Could you, this is another, like, horror movie image.
Yeah.
The entire surface of Egypt is swarming. There's no dirt anymore. That's horrific. That's a plague.
Yeah.
And this also brings to mind
It is, it's
in
disgusting.
our final discussion about Eliyahu,
Yeah.
it was said that his feet were above the ground, that he walked above the ground, that his feet did not touch.
Right, because he was intermediate between the heavenly realm and the earthly realm. Right, because using your description or analysis, Eliyahu's power is coming from God and not from the earth, whereas the Egyptian sorcerers are connecting to the ground of their land.
Sorcerer's feet are not touching the ground. His sorcerer
Cool.
cannot succeed.
Cool. Okay, so all of these descriptions so far are assuming that to bring out or take out the lice means to make more of it. If we look at Chizkuni at the next source, we'll see that there's another way to read that word. Yeah. thank you.
Some explain to bring out the lice, meaning to negate them. They tried to counteract the plague because that's something that people would notice. They did not attempt to bring more lice like Aaron did because all the dust of the earth was already lice.
Right.
Okay, so they couldn't have made more lice even if they wanted to, but they tried to negate the plague. They tried to counteract it. The verb lehotzi, to take out or to bring out, could very easily mean to conjure up or to get rid of, to take it out of here and send the lice away someplace else.
Of course, that undermines the thought that the reason that they didn't succeed is because there was some real there was no real danger of death, right? So those wouldn't be consistent explanations, right, for why they didn't succeed.
The thing about no danger of death was trying to explain why there was no warning.
Oh, right, sorry, you're right.
Except that, what about the whole thing about the frogs
Right?
that we just talked about? That if there were frogs covering everything, how did they bring out more frogs? Didn't we just say that like an hour ago?
Mm-hmm.
With the
Or the original-
frogs.
It was the same, is that what I brought up, when it's like
Right.
the magicians,
Oh.
and I said, well.
They conjured up more frogs.
Yeah.
How,
Right, so
how
they
would we
brought-
know? How would we know that if they?
Oh, how we tell the difference?
There were frogs here,
Assumedly-
frogs there.
Assumedly, they would be near the river. Right. Assumedly, they would maybe be near the river, and they would see like more swarms come up.
But how do you know that's
Maybe.
not
I'm just
that's
saying,
not-
but
But they weren't worrying about making all these things so impeccably
Yeah.
parallel. Right. They were just
Right.
riffing.
Wow.
Saying, look, we can do it too.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Let's see.
By the way, I thought that this was Luzzatto.
Yeah? What are they bringing
comment
from
here
Luzzatto?
was, and I don't know which Luzzatto it is, but
Probably
it was
Chanel.
just a sort of description about what the reference to dust is. That it was, it's that it appeared to the people that it was coming from the dust because there were so many gnats. The gnats looked like dust.
Oh, like when you have swarm.
It says, thus it appeared to
Cool.
the people, owing to the multitude of the insects, that you're referring to this dust of the earth became gnats. That it was like, there were so many, that's what it looked like, that it was,
A cloud.
yeah, cloud, exactly.
Huh.
That cloud, yeah. Although I thought that the imagery I was looking for, but it isn't in the text, was that the sort of the dust, like the wind blew and it blew a dust, right? You don't see dust unless the wind is blowing.
Right.
So it blew up this dust, and that is precisely how lice would land on the animals and the people, if that's what was happening. But it's not clear from the text that it doesn't use the word wind, it doesn't
Right.
say blown, except, as I say, how does dust appear but in the absence of wind?
Right, so
There's dust in here, but we don't know it unless.
I think it's perfectly reasonable for you to present that as your own interpretation. It would make sense. Like when you're imagining what it must have looked like, feel free, go ahead. Bring that to your Seder.
Right? We're supposed to do that. That's a good thing.
Did we, I know this
Yep.
is the first class, so I apologize if this came up already. but
It did.
there-
Oh.
I missed the first half of the first class, so
Okay.
I'm kind of in a glass house
There
over
was
here.
I don't know if it was Sarna or who, the whole scientific thing of how the blood in the
Okay.
river was, I forget,
Red
algae.
red algae.
Right.
Made the frogs come up. We did this already, okay?
Well,
We know the algae
we're
made the
not
frogs come up,
addressing
we did
it.
that.
Right, we're not addressing the question of reinterpreting the plagues through sort of
Scientific
through
method.
scientific methods. Although that something like that will appear soon in one of these interpretations. This is more about sort of trying to understand the plagues from a sort of a
Other meanings?
like sort of an overwhelming spiritual fantastical like plague experience as opposed to
sounds like an amusement park.
oh sorry as opposed to trying to figure out naturalistically let's like analyze it down into
Right.
to sort of
Insignificant.
I don't want to say insignificance but
And it doesn't make it any less miraculous, because God still set, even if it was scientific and one followed the other, God still set it in motion. It
Yeah,
just,
either way, right.
it doesn't take away from me.
Right, so we're gonna see one of the commentaries that we're gonna get to brings up a little bit of that, but just sort of the focus of it. I wanted to be on more of this kind of stuff.
You make it sound like a new park at Disney when you say
Oh, okay.
it's like a plague experience.
Okay. Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, I guess let's see one last thing. This Kasuto comment at the end here of the Kinim.
Yeah, with your deep voice.
It is the finger of God. They admit that there is here a power greater than their power, and that Moshe and Aharon are not acting on their own power. Like they, the hieroglyphists, are acting on their own power. Instead, they are the agents of a supernatural power that no human being can withstand. But their admittance is only partial, because they don't say the finger of Hashem, but only the finger of God. What?
Yeah, continue.
They still don't recognize, the divinity of Hashem, but only recognize that there is here some kind of divine power.
They use the term Elohim, the generic term that can mean God with a capital G or a lowercase g. If one of the points was to make Paro and the Egyptians recognize Hashem, the God of the Israelites, they haven't gotten there yet.
Not only the God of the Israelites, but ultimately the one.
Right. The God who is fighting for the Israelites and who is showing them that God controls
But there's
everything.
no other.
That did not seem to be
No?
explicit in what God wants
It
them
doesn't say
to
that in
know.
Torah. at all.
It says it a little bit, but it
Yes,
doesn't
it
say
does.
it doesn't say
Well,
it
to the Israelites.
Ten
here.
Commandments, you shall have no other God before me. It doesn't say there shall be no other gods. It just says
Well,
he's
I'm
going to be
the-
the top God.
That's for another class. Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I'm just gonna say one thing on that topic. You know the term henotheism? Okay. Then I guess this
Spell
doesn't
it?
matter. Henotheism.
It's the belief that henna is God.
No.
And,
No.
Henna.
Henotheism.
Henotheism.
Right. So henotheism. It doesn't. If you were familiar with that term, those would be more whatever. But
Okay.
henotheism is
Now we-
the common term for a belief that there may be many
it's a common
divine
term.
powers, but there's only one God who's sort of above the others or is worthy of worship, sort of like that. So many people believe that Bnei Israel had that kind of
Maybe I'll
belief,
use that in Howie.
and that it took a while to
I'm
go
sure
from
Howie will
henotheism
know
to
it.
monotheism and to believe that only God exists and that all these other gods, not that they're not just inferior or not worthwhile, but they don't exist at all.
Well, but-
I had a professor in college who insisted that henotheism was a dumb word, it was malformed, and that we should call it monolatry instead. Because monolatry more clearly means worship of one as opposed to belief in one. Monotheism is belief in one God. Henotheism is the same thing, except with, I think it's the Greek prefix heno for one instead of the Latin prefix mono for one. And so henotheism and monotheism etymologically are the same thing. So he said we should use monolatry, like idolatry means worship of idols. Monolatry means worship of one as opposed to belief in one. But
I mean, you
that
can
doesn't
believe that there are more, but you can only worship one?
yeah, that's what monolatry is.
Just
And so
So that would fit with henotheism. That would be.
no, exactly. It's
Oh,
just a
the same
different word
thing.
for
I
the same
got you,
thing.
I
It's
got
just
you, okay.
I had this professor who insisted that it was a better word to use.
okay.
Can I ask a question about sort of related to what you just said and what we've been talking about? I've always struggled with the so-called magicians.
Okay.
What do we traditionally understand the magicians to be? Right today, we understand that magicians aren't really magicians; they are illusionists. Right? They make you think that you're seeing something, but really that's not what's happening. Is there some sense that there was a belief that these magicians could really do magic?
Yeah.
Sorcerers? So
I think the majority belief was that such things existed, people could do such things, but there were also opinions that they weren't real and they didn't exist.
But God knew better.
So what about
But the
Honi?
people did. What
The people
about
did.
Samuel
It's all
went to
about
the witch of
Endor.
But
What,
the-
Yeah.
what about Honi the circle maker? Was he considered a magician?
He definitely wasn't considered a magician in the
Sorcery.
sorcery sense, in the sort of forbidden magical powers sense. He's weird. He's a weird figure. He's mostly just sort of daring God, and then God gives in. That's what he's about. Like, he doesn't do anything himself. He just draws a circle, and he's like, hey, God, I'm going to stand in my circle until you give us rain. And then God listens to him. Like, whatever that is, it's something very different than, like, I have magical powers, zap.
But there's a lot of stories about, as far as, going against what we know, what we think the laws of nature are today.
Right.
And that, so whatever that means.
Right.
You
So
know?
I think it's very common for people to believe in these kinds of powers.
The reason I say that in the context of recognizing that there are other gods, I've always thought of, being able to control, if you believe that there are some people that can control, matter and create things out of nothing, or turn a rod into a snake.
Or make water flow
Or
backwards,
turn
make
the
walls fall halfway.
Right, all those things,
Yeah.
then you're sort of in a way recognizing or believing that they are something higher than just a regular person, it seems to me, and almost godlike. And the fact that that the Torah talks about them so matter-of-factly, like, well, of course there are sorcerers, of course there are people who can, do these things. And as Bob points out, because he's like the smartest guy in the class and always kissing up to the teacher and stuff, he points out that did I say that out loud?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Recorded.
That was my inside voice. That there were other there may have been other gods, other things that people were recognizing as higher than man, and just the fact that it's talked about so matter-of-factly in here, it's always struck me as a strange thing that God would talk about sorcerers as if they could really do these things, and apparently there was that belief.
Well, that's why some philosophers like Rambam insisted that belief in these types of magic is actually an affront to monotheism, and that therefore it's all wrong, it's all false, and all of these people in the Torah who look like they're doing things are really just charlatans and doing trickery and illusionists. Right. And then you basically have the machloket, the disagreement of the Torah says you're not allowed to use magical powers. So Rambam says, why are we not allowed to use magical powers? Because they're not real, they're fake, they're stupid, they make people believe dumb things, they take you away from God, and therefore don't try it, don't make believe you can do it, don't give in to this sort of negative social control thing. And then others say, if we're not allowed to do it, there must be something to do. And so basically that disagreement has existed for like 1,000 years. And nowadays, I'm fairly certain that most of us fall on like the Rambam side, but that's just how it is. I mean, there's always been discussion over it.
So, so what about a golem? How could, what's the
A
explanation?
golem?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so, sorry, I'm just very tempted to make a Lord of the Rings joke.
Feel free.
But, no, I would have to think of one first. But
Bit precious.
so, right.
The Vilna Gandalf?
Right, right. So in the time of the Gemara, it's fairly clear that people believed in magical powers. There's a statement in Masechet Sanhedrin in the Babylonian Talmud that says that you can cause the same physical effect through the use of supernatural powers in a way which would be forbidden by the Torah, forbidden by rabbinic decree, or completely permissible. And it calls these three different methods, kishuf, which is what we've been translating as sorcery.
Forbidden by the Torah?
Forbidden by the Torah, because the Torah says, don't do that. The second one that's forbidden by rabbinic decree is called achizat einayim, which literally means grabbing your eyes, which would seem to be some kind of illusion. And the one that's described as permissible is called hilchot yitzira, the laws of creation. Because of course, since this is Judaism, anything that you can do, there must be laws governing it. And so, hilchot yitzira, whatever it is some idea that it's possible to supernaturally affect the world in a way which is permitted or ratified by God. And so stories about golems are based on this idea that there are ways to do that. That doesn't mean that the stories about golems are true.
I thought the stories about golems were kind of made up in order to make the Jewish people who had absolutely no power feel like they were totally made up to make them feel better and like that there was some kind of power.
Could be.
I never
Could
thought
be.
they were any.
I know people have written like historical studies of golem legends and where they come from, but I haven't read the articles about it.
I never thought that anybody ever thought that there really was a golem. I thought they were always just.
Well, the
I know people
Maharal
do.
never said he did it.
Sure.
People do.
Legend arose around him. The Maharal never said he did it.
Right.
People try to sneak up in the attic of the shul in Prague to try and find the golem because people believe in it.
Sure.
Yeah, but he was destroyed. So there wouldn't be anything to see.
But people believe all kinds of things through the ages, right? And what we understand to be true and not true has evolved.
Right.
Supposedly related to them.
That's okay.
Okay.
Think about that.
It looks like we are
That's cool.
still behind schedule, but thank God and thank you all that we're behind schedule because of the really great discussions we have been having. So it looks like next time we'll be starting with Arov.
Are we gonna make
These swarms.
How many do we have?
We'd
Two
better.
more sessions?
Yeah, 2 more sessions.
So we only have
And-
3.5 each time,
What?
right? That's it.
We can do it.
Yeah, but
So Ron, this session is on Facebook.
Is it called? You did.
This discussion.
This is on Facebook. I
Stop.
heard most of the first session.